My sister received $1 from my family. You're just not leadership material, Megan, my mother said, her voice echoing across the ballroom despite her composed tone. Your sister has the presence, the business acumen. You're brilliant with technology, of course, but Vanessa understands. She also had $5 million and the CEO title for an app that I built alone, so I legally took over the entire company. As my mother gave Vanessa a ceremonial check for $1,500,000, her leadership bonus for a company transformation. Hundreds of eyes turned toward our table, investors, business partners, and employees, all watching my public dismissal. The gold banner celebrating $250 million above the stage seemed to mock me. Vanessa said, "Thank you, Mother. I'm honored." I stood up to accept the check and the roaring applause that followed, keeping a smile on my face and raising my champagne glass. In a toast as something hard and cold crystallized in my chest. 6 months of sleepless nights, thousands of lines of code written in my apartment after long workdays at the office, and a groundbreaking inventory management system that had brought Anderson Supply Chain Solutions back from the verge of bankruptcy. On her own, all thanks to my sister, Megan Anderson, a 29-year-old software developer and seemingly invisible daughter, who just saved my family's 70-year-old company from going bankrupt. Anderson Supply Chain Solutions had been losing money for years due to our antiquated The Symbiose app I created transformed our entire business model, creating a seamless system that not only retained our major clients, but also attracted dozens of new ones in just 6 months. When our biggest client threatened to leave, taking 40% of our revenue with them, I saw an opportunity to finally prove my worth to the family. Someone called out from the crowd, and Vanessa took the microphone, her smile shining under the ballroom lights, saying, "Anderson Supply Chain Solutions has transformed from being on the edge of bankruptcy to generating $250 million in revenue, a 400% increase, tonight." Instead, I was patted on the head like a good pet, and Vanessa, with her MBA and natural charisma, was handed the keys to the kingdom I'd saved speech. I must acknowledge my sister's technical contribution, but the app that has revolutionized our business was genuinely a team effort, she said, adding that it has always been about family and innovation. As the evening went on, I went around the audience and accepted congratulations from everyone. I nodded courteously as she reduced 6 months of groundbreaking software development to a technical contribution. Who knew who had truly established symbiosis? Regardless of my mother's public persona, nobody in the glitzy ballroom, not even my mother or Vanessa, realized that. I had never really given Anderson Supply Chain Solutions ownership of the app, a detail that would be crucial tomorrow morning. The Anderson family had been in the logistics industry since after World War II. My grandfather began transporting building materials in a single truck. Each generation grew the business, and in the 1990s, my mother took it nationwide. It was always expected that Vanessa, my senior, who was 5 years old, would eventually take over because she had the business degree, the polished manner, and most importantly, our mother's full trust. I was the odd one out in the family. Before he passed away 10 years ago, my father had been my champion. He would tell my mother that Megan sees the future and that she understands systems in ways that the rest of us never will. After Dad passed away, I honored his faith in me by obtaining a degree in computer science and then a master's in artificial intelligence, hoping that my expertise would eventually find a place in the family business. But after I returned with my credentials, my mother put me in a support role in the IT department, keeping our antiquated systems up to date rather than overhauling them. She would remind me that we are a logistics company, not a tech startup. So whenever I suggested modernization, let's stick with what we already have. In the meantime, Vanessa was being prepared for leadership by shadowing our mother in executive meetings and representing the company at industry events. I didn't mind the attention she received because she was good with people and had the networking skills necessary for our business. What annoyed me, though, was how my technical expertise was constantly downplayed and treated more like a quirky pastime than a business asset. 6 months ago, our largest client threatened to leave. Citing I saw my chance and went to my mother with a proposal. Give me 6 months to create a proprietary app that will transform our supply chain management. We don't have the funds to hire a development team, so she said dismissively, "You don't need one. I can do it myself." She actually laughed at that, but Vanessa stepped in and let her try, asking what we stand to lose at this point. It wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement, but it was sufficient. I was given a 6-month deadline and a modest budget, but neither of them realized that I had been working on the project for almost a year, building the framework in my apartment on the weekends, and in the evenings, I worked formally during the day and continued to code late into the night, documenting every decision and line of code. The project was my opportunity to finally demonstrate my worth to the family business, but I wasn't naive enough to believe that professional jealousy couldn't exist between sisters. Nevertheless, I never anticipated tonight's total dismissal of my contribution or the sinking of the ship, partly because of good development practices, and partly because something in Vanessa's support had felt calculating rather than sisterly. I came to the office early the morning after the gala with the intention of clearing my head before the upcoming meetings regarding the transition to Vanessa's leadership, having realized that my family might never see me as anything more than technical support. The development lab I had been using was hidden away in the basement of our Seattle headquarters, out of sight like my contribution to the company's survival as I entered the lab. Vanessa had not bothered to visit the whiteboard where I had mapped the Symbio's architecture during the entire development process, so I was surprised to see her there already. I put my laptop bag down and admired your handiwork, and she had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed. "Don't be like that, Meg. Last night was business, not personal. Taking credit for my work strikes me as being rather personal." Vanessa sighed as I sat on the edge of my desk and said, "Look, I know you did the technical heavy lifting, but Mother's right. This company needs a face people trust who speaks their language. The clients relate to me, and that justifies the bonus and the promotion for acting like you had anything to do with developing the app that saved the company." I retorted that the app is company property, created by an Anderson. She said, "Your salary was compensation for that work, just like any other project," changing the tone from conciliatory to businesslike. Her words struck me like a physical blow, not because they were mean, but rather because they showed how completely my family misunderstood me and modern business realities. They honestly thought the app automatically. "I wanted to let you know that I belong to the company just because I was an Anderson and an employee." Vanessa seemed to be taking my silence as approval when she announced the new executive structure. This morning, I was taken aback for a moment when she said, "This is a significant title bump for my team manager and a 30% raise. We recognize your contribution. I know you'd understand that the board meeting starts at 9 o'clock, so try not to be late. It looks unprofessional." After she left, I sat at my desk and stared at the intricate system architecture on my whiteboard, remembering all those nights when all that innovation was reduced to being the tech. I finish because I'm just the tech person, Mag. Truly. I opened my laptop and found a folder called Symbio's Legal. It contained documentation I had prepared months ago but hoped never to need. Copyright registrations, timestamps of development milestones, a GitHub repository proving my sole authorship, and most importantly the fact that I had developed the majority of things. This person should be thankful for a title bump while my sister took the real power and compensation. It was time for Plan B. I took out my phone and called the number I had saved, which I never expected to use, Heather. "It's Megan Anderson. I need your legal services after all. How soon can you come to my office at 8:55 a.m.? I had hoped that my family would see my worth on their own. That hope had died a very public death last night. Heather Preston, one of Seattle's leading intellectual property lawyers, was standing with me outside the boardroom. Her presence alone would make an impression, but the papers in her leather portfolio would accomplish much more. "Are you sure about this? There's no going back to the way things were with your family once we walk in," Heather said quietly, looking for me. The boardroom was filled with board members, mostly family friends and business associates who had supported Anderson Supply Chain Solutions for decades. And at precisely 9 o'clock, Mother sat at the head of the table with Vanessa to her right. All eyes were on Heather, obviously wondering who the stranger in the power suit might be. "Megan," Mom said, "you've brought a guest. This is Heather Preston, my attorney, just in time." I sat down across from Vanessa and said, "I believe the first item on today's agenda is the new executive structure, which directly concerns me." The room seemed to cool down by 10, and Mom's smile completely disappeared. I had no idea you felt the need for legal representation for a family business. She stated icily that I didn't either until last night, when it became evident that family and business have quite different meanings. Me and her huge lover entered. She calmly and confidently grasped my hand while I was paralyzed in fear and said, "You're leaving with me." We then in private first, Megan. In fact, I believe the entire board should hear this, I retorted, since they have fiduciary duties too. As the room erupted in bewildered muttering, Heather opened her portfolio and handed copies of a document to each person at the table. This is a preliminary licensing agreement for the Symbio's application, which legally belongs to Megan Anderson as its sole creator and copyright holder. Vanessa grabbed the document, and her face lit up. The company and what I'm about to share directly affect Anderson's primary asset. Flushing as she read through its contents, she said, "This is ridiculous. The app was created for Anderson Supply Chain Solutions by an employee, so it belongs to the business." Heather stayed completely composed. This would have been the case if development had only taken place during business hours, utilizing company resources and falling within Miss Anderson's job description. But as the documentation we've prepared shows, Miss Anderson produced a second, thicker document outlining my development timeline, complete with timestamps, commits, and proof of when and where the work had been done. This is a family business, and the mother lost her composure. Approximately 78% of the development took place on her own time using her own equipment, going well beyond the parameters of her position as IT manager. Vanessa accused me of slapping the licensing agreement down on the table after everything we've done for you, saying, "What exactly have you done for me, Vanessa? Take credit for my work." "I'm not playing games," I said quietly, "and I'm protecting my intellectual property while still trying to benefit the company. The licensing agreement is extremely favorable, much more so than you'd get from any third party. Agree to a bonus for my creativity. I'd like to review these documents before we proceed if Miss Anderson's claims are valid," said Harold Jameson, a tech venture capitalist and board member who had been my father's friend. Mother looked betrayed by his reasonable response. "Harold, surely you're not entertaining this rebellion." "It's not rebellion, Eleanor. It's business. And if your daughter has created valuable intellectual property, she has the right to protect it." He turned to me, "But I had to ask what your intentions are, Megan, and what result you're hoping for." Before I could respond, the mother interrupted, stating that she was clearly trying to extract money from her own family by threatening to take away the technology that our clients now rely on. She gave me a cold look. The accusations hurt, but I remained calm. "What I want is credit for my work and a fair share in the company's future. The Symbio's app isn't just a way to improve our business. It's our business now, and I want to have a say in how it develops." The battle lines were drawn, and based on my mother's and sister's expressions, this was only the beginning. As Heather meticulously provided proof of my ownership rights, Harold and 2 other board members with technical backgrounds asked insightful questions, obviously taking the matter seriously, while Mother and Vanessa became more antagonistic. This is significant because if Megan has any technical claim to the software, withdrawing it now would destroy for the third time. I clarified that the licensing agreement ensures Anderson Supply Chain Solutions can continue using Symbios without interruption, and just establishing that I own the intellectual property and should receive the proper compensation. The company mother claimed that would hurt everyone, including Megan herself. This is nothing more than a tantrum, because she wasn't named CEO, influence over its development, so undermining the leadership structure that was revealed last night. Vanessa said, "Regardless of titles, you effectively control the company if you control the app that runs our entire operation." Her assessment was accurate, which is why my family ought to have taken these ramifications into account before discounting my. Harold's call for a short break and the board member's departure left me and Heather alone in the conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Mother and Vanessa engaged in a heated discussion with the company's general counsel, who had been hurriedly called in the middle of the meeting. "They're going to counter with something," Heather cautioned. "Stay focused on your primary objectives." After consulting with the council, we acknowledge that Megan may have certain rights regarding the symbio's application. Her expression changed from indignation to calculation, a look I recognized from the many business negotiations I'd witnessed growing up. She started each word, obviously painful to utter, in the interest of we're willing to make a generous settlement, offer to maintain family harmony and business continuity. The company's lawyer sent counter-proposal documents and offered a one-time payment of $5 million in exchange for the full transfer of all application rights. This is 5 times the bonus that Vanessa's mother received. And it clearly acknowledges your technical contribution while enabling the business to proceed. For most people, $5 million was a substantial sum of money under stable leadership that could change their lives. But Symbio's was more than just code. It was my vision for revolutionizing not only Anderson's supply chain solutions, but possibly the entire logistics sector. The app I had developed was worth far more than $5 million, both strategically and financially. Before Harold interrupted, I had studied the technical documentation, and I must admit that Megan's work goes far beyond what I would consider a typical employee contribution. This isn't just an app. It's a complete reimagining of how logistics can operate in the digital age. Several other board members nodded, and I felt validated that my work was finally being understood. Harold, however, continued to fragment ownership of such a crucial system, which creates unmanageable business risks. If after recognizing Megan's ownership, we must confront leadership head-on, Mother asked pointedly, so we should think about whether our old plans for leadership succession still make sense in light of this new reality. To my surprise, 2 other board members immediately agreed with Mother's face, implying that I might be a better candidate to lead the company than Vanessa. The Anderson family retains a controlling interest, and we have decided that this board does not dictate family succession. The company's attorney interrupted, appearing noticeably uneasy, and stated that if the symbio's intellectual property is found to belong to Megan personally, the controlling interest issue becomes complex, because it is essential to operations. At that point, I realized that this argument had gone much further than I had expected. I was not only questioning my position in the family hierarchy anymore, but I might even be assuming control of the entire business my grandfather had started. My mother appeared to recognize this as well. She looked at me across the table, and for the first time in my life, I noticed something different in her eyes. Fear. The meeting was adjourned with a lot of tension. Enough to cut. Mother asked for a day to think things through before meeting again, and the board agreed. As everyone was filing out, Vanessa grabbed my arm and asked, "What are you trying to do exactly?" "Humiliate Mother, take over the company, and get revenge because I got a bonus, because I created something valuable. And I want proper recognition for it," she demanded in a low voice. I responded, "It's not enough to be CTO. You want my job." I pulled my arm free. "I never asked for your job, Vanessa. But I did get a seat at the table where decisions about my technology are made." This place buzzed me with a text, looked at it, and gave me a look I couldn't understand. 15 minutes after Vanessa left, Heather worried that I wouldn't have legal counsel when I met her mother, but I reassured her that I could manage a family conversation. "Text me if you need backup," she insisted before leaving, and her corner office looked out over the Seattle waterfront and the Space Needle. Visible in the distance on clear days, she stood at the window when I walked in. She said, "Close the door," without turning, and I did as she said. We waited in silence until at last, Mother spoke, still facing the window. "Did you know that your grandfather began with a single truck that he drove himself, delivering building supplies throughout Washington state and sleeping in it?" "I know the family history," she added, turning to face me as needed. "Your father established this company with his hands and his tenacity. He developed it through relationships. He knew everyone in the industry, recalled their children's names, and sent cards on birthdays." She abruptly interrupted me. "You know the sanitized version we provide at business functions. You have no idea how often we..." She moved to her desk and opened a drawer, taking out a thick folder. "You think this is about an app about who gets credit, but it's actually about 70 years of Anderson blood, sweat, and sacrifices." She slapped the folder down, almost went under. "You don't know that your father mortgaged our house twice to make payroll during recessions. You don't know that I once went 3 years without receiving a salary, so we could afford to modernize our warehouses. I approached her desk carefully because I didn't want to harm the company. "And what do you want, Megan? Tell me exactly what result you're looking for." Harold had asked the same question, but coming from my mother, it carried weight. "Your technology is amazing and revolutionary, but an app can be copied, improved upon, and replaced. The app isn't just a tool, it's a new business model, and I want to help shape how it evolves." Mother studied me for a long time before opening the folder, which contained a new proposal, not a bailout this time, but a restructuring in four. The first time, she seemed to be genuinely asking rather than assuming that I want to be valued for what I contribute. Perhaps it's time for Anderson Supply Chain Solutions to change as well. The document described a daring reorganization that would spin off the technology into a new company called Anderson Tech, which would license the software to other businesses in the industry, as well as to our family business. The proposed CEO of this new venture told me that it wasn't a concession, but rather a challenge, and the stakes had just gotten higher. Mom stood at the head of the table, commanding the room as she had for decades after much thought and consultation, proposing a strategic restructuring of Anderson Supply Chain Solutions. She announced, projecting a confidence I knew masked deeper emotions. The board reconvened the following morning with an expanded agenda. The success of the Symbio's application has revealed new potential for our business's future. She presented her plan to spin off Anderson Tech as a distinct company under my direction, with Vanessa continuing to oversee the traditional logistics, operations. Both businesses would stay under the Anderson family's aegis, resulting in a more varied business portfolio. This strategy acknowledges the importance of our current operations, as well as the Megan's technological innovations, transformative potential. She finished by looking at each board member, and when she was done, everyone's eyes were on me. The proposal was shrewd because it recognized my ownership of the technology without completely shifting power. And it also included a number of clauses that would keep ultimate control firmly in my mother's hands as the chair of both companies' boards. "Thank you," I said in a steady voice that the proposal needed some changes, and I gestured to Heather, who gave me a counter-proposal that I had worked on all night. Although I agreed with the basic framework of separate businesses, my version gave Anderson Tech clear independence and a board made up of tech industry veterans rather than friends from the family. It also stated that while the family, most importantly, my proposal included a formal acknowledgement that the intellectual property of the Symbio belonged to me personally, with a licensing structure that ensured fair compensation for its use. These terms are non-negotiable. I concluded my technology and my conditions, and I believe Harold was the first to voice his concerns. The logistics business would be the main client, and Anderson Tech would be free to pursue broader market opportunities. 6 months after the restructuring, I stood on it. He had faith in me. "Are you okay?" my teacher inquired after class. "I'm fine," I replied. I wasn't, and we both knew it. I made a choice that day. I began to watch everything. Without a phone or other means of documentation, I relied on my memories. I made notes in my head. I promised to babysit before my eyes, although tensions between us remained strained. Perhaps I did, perhaps I didn't. I couldn't rely on my own intellect. Every chuckle made my head hurt, even if the Henderson kids were secured, learning how to control him rather than run away from him. She was not blind. She participated. Dad gave back to the community by announcing at breakfast that he was coaching softball. He was creating the ideal picture. The action seemed familiar to me. Create a public image that will make the truth untrue. We studied unreliable narrators in school. I didn't miss the eyes carried. Crown Jewel, a reality she was still adjusting to, said that innovation often comes from unexpected places and that sometimes the hardest part isn't creating something new, but finding the courage to claim ownership of your creation. "Your father would be proud," she continued quietly, "because he always said you had a different perspective on systems than the rest of us." "Thank you," I said, taken aback by the sincere expression. "That means a lot." "I underestimated this world and you," she said, glancing around at the IT execs networking nearby. "I won't make that mistake again." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was the closest anyone had ever come from Eleanor Anderson, and as she left, I felt a startling lack of victory. The validation I had hoped for tasted different in reality. less sweet and more complex, but I had gained independence, recognition, and the freedom to follow my dreams without interference. The family relationships had been. Harrison showed up at my elbow, champagne in hand, and he said, "Your grandfather built an empire with a single truck. Imagine what you'll build with a single app." I grinned and clinked my glass against his, realizing that this was only the beginning as I looked around the room full of people celebrating the technology I had created. Sometimes the most effective kind of retaliation involves reaching heights that others have never reached rather than bringing them down. Thought you could arrive and take your appropriate location when you receive.